Hello and welcome to this edition of Interview. Today we're going to be talking to Jeremy Jauncey, the CEO and founder of Beautiful Destinations. Jeremy, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
When did you begin and really first think that you could make travel your trade? Take us back.
Okay, so 10 years ago was when I started the business, but it didn't actually start as a business, to be honest. It started as an Instagram account. Very shortly after Instagram had launched, so before there were vertical videos, before there was any kind of business analytics, before it became the platform that we all know it for today, I'd started basically connecting with people who were creating content, photographs at the time, around the world, trying to show their perspective of what was happening in their day-to-day lives without a perspective of building a business. It was only probably sort of 3 and a bit years after that then we started to monetize it and build the company from there.
What was the key moment when you thought that passion project could be monetized?
So we were very lucky because this region has been very, very supportive to Beautiful Destinations from the very, very early part of our business. We were contacted by the Dubai government. They wanted to be the first tourism board in the world to launch a marketing campaign around a hashtag. The hashtag, which is My Dubai, which everybody now knows. We were brought in to help them with actually a big campaign at the Burj Al Arab. So our first ever client was Dubai Tourism and the Burj Al Arab. And actually at the time, we hadn't incorporated the business. I was literally just posting on the Instagram and working with people on Instagram without having a company set up. So as soon as we got that bit of business, scrambled, incorporated the company, and then got everything up and running from there.
What has been the biggest challenge and I guess the biggest learning curve throughout that process?
So we're 10 years in now, and I'd say definitely the first 5 years, the industry was not interested. I would go and meet with, or try to meet with leaders in travel who really didn't value social media, didn't think social media would be a platform for them to generate business. The early stages of social media, certainly they thought that it was something that younger kids would use, that they would just be messing around it and kind of passing time without any commercial component to it. So it took us a little bit of time to knock down those doors and go in and meet with people. And it's really only actually been in the last 2 years since the pandemic that the business has really, really exploded for us as more and more destinations and hotels and people in travel just realize how important, particularly content, not just social media, but realize how important it is to invest in these platforms. So that's been the journey.
How has social media transformed the travel industry as a whole?
Yeah, it's just been monumental. It's just been huge. I think if we look at today, what we're seeing is that leading travel bodies are suggesting that up to 90% of travelers will book travel based on content that they see on social media first. So for many of us, the first time that we are thinking or being inspired about a destination, it's because we are scrolling through Instagram Reels, or we're on TikTok, or we're seeing somebody who has created a piece of content that inspires us. If you go a level deeper, what we're hearing is that from leaders at Google, that as much as 40% of younger travelers are actually not even using Google Search or Google Maps anymore. They're going into TikTok and Instagram Reels, and they're typing in the hashtags of the place that they are, the restaurant that they want to go to see that video content. So I think there's a very, very big shift that is starting to happen within those platforms for the way people actually discover travel. And that's something that's now at the front and center of the way social can be so important in the story.
I think one of the stats is 400 digital moments before they even book something.
Exactly.
Where are we consuming them from?
Yeah, the majority is vertical video on Instagram and TikTok. Really, that's where the majority of people are spending their time. And if you think about it, it's fairly logical. Travel for the last 20 years, you would go into a little booking form, you'd type in the destination you wanted to go, you'd be presented with hundreds, potentially even thousands of links without any visual content. Now we live in a world where if you want to see what it's like to have breakfast at a restaurant in Paris, you can type that in to a search function on a social media platform and see the videos of exactly what that experience is like. And that is much more immersive, that is much more conducive to actually buying than seeing a kind of static link on a web page. So it has been relatively slow for the travel industry to catch up to this trend, but I think in the next sort of 2 to 3 years, we're going to see that absolutely explode.
Now, you've been described as an environmental change maker. How important is sustainability? And it's a bit of a buzzword, how do we really promote it in this day and age?
When it comes to travel, there are a lot of things that the industry needs to change. And I've tried to be a very vocal voice that comes out and says we cannot go back to the kind of travel that we were doing pre-pandemic, because 2019, I think, 10th year of consecutive growth in our industry. 1 in every 10 jobs was in travel and tourism. 1 in every 5 newly created jobs was in travel and tourism. So the industry was exploding, but as was over tourism. Unfortunately, people were all going to the same places. Yeah. We were seeing places like Barcelona, places like Iceland, places like Milan and Rome, actually where their citizens were pushing back and saying there's too much tourism. Like the experience for travelers is not good, and it's damaging where we live. So I think that sort of starting point cannot be where we pick up when we think about the future of travel. And really for us, what we're trying to do is talk about lesser known destinations, push people to go to places that they maybe haven't gone to before. Social media is an amazing way to do that.
Your job is to travel. Mm-hmm. How conscious are you in your personal life and personal travels to reduce your carbon footprint, all of that stuff? Yeah. You know, do you practice what you preach?
Yeah, very much so. So the most enlightening thing for me was when I was asked to be an ambassador for the World Wildlife Foundation. And the first thing that they taught me was, before you do anything, measure your impact. Because if you don't know what your impact is, you cannot take steps to reduce it. They have an amazing carbon footprint calculator. Actually, the WWF UK site, I think, is one of the best tools in the world for understanding what your carbon impact actually is. Mm-hmm. It's made up of a series of decisions that you take in your life, like the energy you consume at home, where you buy your goods and services from, how often you travel, how you travel, and you input your information into this calculator, and it basically tells you which parts of your life are having the most negative impact. So for someone like me that had been traveling a lot, it was very easy for me to see that if I changed the way I travel, so that can be changing the class of flight that you do. If you're doing short haul trips using trains instead of planes, you may have seen in the last week the French have actually decided to ground all domestic flights if there is a train going in the same route, which is again to reduce the impact of flying. And I think that's something that I like to be aware of, and then use the platforms that I have to educate people about.
You're also a big advocate, and you've spoken out about the impact of social media on mental health.
Yes.
And, you know, we live in a society where a lot of people think they have to validate their life through what they post. You know, what advice would you give to people who may be struggling?
Yeah, I think it's very close to home for me. Mental health is something that I think we don't talk about enough. When I was growing up, when I was younger, I wanted to be a professional athlete, and I'd played rugby for Scotland whilst I was at school. I went to New Zealand and I got an injury which ended my career, which meant that I was injured to such a degree that I could never play again. Going through the subsequent year or two, I think looking back now, was the most challenging thing I've ever faced in my life, and I didn't talk about it. I didn't have people around me that I could talk about it, and certainly didn't have an environment where I felt like there were people I could connect with. Unfortunately, with a lot of social media, it's very easy to connect with anyone and everyone, and people really don't filter what they say. In many cases, it kind of becomes a guard for a person to say absolutely anything that they want on social media, because they're somewhat anonymous. So I think there are places and pockets around the world where they're limiting the amount of time that people spend on social media. They have tools that allow you to kind of really closely track the kind of content that maybe your kids or your family are looking at, and they're just more aware. So I think anyone that really has challenges as a consequence of what they experience online has to come forward and talk about it. And hopefully, if people with an audience or people with influence can tell them that and can reach out to them, then you'll see a big change.
What does the future of Beautiful Destinations hold for you? I mean, any dreams down the line to collaborate with the likes of Netflix or Amazon? You know, what can we expect next from you?
Yes, so the entertainment side is probably not where we're going to focus. We're going to focus more on the booking side. So we have brought in some investors that are helping us build out a booking experience. We're in the process of building out a team in Berlin that's actually building a product that will launch in the early part of next year. And the thinking is basically, so much of travel inspiration is happening in social media, but then actually leaving social media and ultimately booking is a very painful place, because the majority of people don't know where they want to go when they think about travel. They need that inspiration and that kind of guidance. So we are building a product that will talk to that, and hopefully be able to leverage the amount of people that follow our social channels and the influence that we have to help people actually start discovering destinations and hotels, and then book it through a social media driven experience.
Best of luck with it all. Jeremy Jauncey, thank you so much for talking to us today on Interview. Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.